Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited because today we are concluding our deep dive into the world of forests.
And it's been quite the journey.
Right. From the tiniest cells to entire ecosystems, it's all connected.
It really is.
We've been using the handbook Roots of Complexity to guide us, and it's covered everything. We've learned so much. So where do we even begin to put it all together?
I think the biggest takeaway from all this research is that a forest, it's not just a bunch of trees standing around. It's really a complex system where everything's connected.
Like a giant puzzle where each piece matters.
Exactly. And all this connections, that's what makes forests so resilient, able to bounce back from challenges.
And we've seen some amazing examples of this, like those mycorrhizal networks. Right?
Precisely. These underground networks, they're like a forest internet. They allow trees to talk to each other and share resources.
Trees talking to each other? That sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. How does that even work?
Well, it's not like they're having conversations, of course, but they send signals through those fungal networks. Like they can warn each other about insect attacks or even help out their offspring.
Wow. So it's like a giant support system underground. What kind of resources are they sharing?
All sorts of things. Water, nutrients, even carbon. It's like a complex trading system going on beneath our feet.
Fascinating. And then there are those mother trees. I've heard so much about them. What's their role in all of this?
Mother trees, they're like the wise elders of the forest, the biggest and oldest trees. And through those mycorrhizal networks, they can actually nurture younger trees.
Like mentors guiding the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. And they help to make the whole forest more resilient. But what happens if we disrupt that? Like with practices that remove these mother trees?
That's a good question, and it's something scientists are studying closely.
Mm-hmm.
Because removing those mother trees can have ripple effects throughout the entire forest. It's not just about one tree, it's about the whole web of connections.
It really makes you appreciate the complexity of it all. It does. It makes you realize how much we still have to learn about these amazing ecosystems.
And how important it is to manage them carefully.
Absolutely. We need to move beyond simplistic solutions and really understand how these complex systems work.
Okay, so we've got this intricate network, wise old trees sharing resources. It sounds idyllic down there. But it can't always be peaceful, right?
Right.
What are some of the challenges that trees face?
You're right. There's competition for resources, threats from pests and diseases, and of course, the ever-present challenge of adapting to a changing environment.
And when you bring humans into the picture, things get even more complicated. I mean, we all know deforestation is a problem, but how does that disruption actually play out within those connections?
Well, when you clear a large area, you're not just removing trees, you're fragmenting habitats, breaking those mycorrhizal networks, and often taking out those vital mother trees.
So it's like pulling threads out of a tapestry. Eventually, the whole thing starts to unravel.
Exactly. And then you add climate change on top of that.
Yeah, the rising temperatures, extreme weather events, all of that. It's a lot for forests to handle.
It is. We're seeing increased tree mortality, more frequent wildfires, and outbreaks of pests and diseases. It's a real challenge.
It all sounds pretty bleak. Is there any hope for the future of forests?
There is. What's amazing is that what we've learned about the complexity of forests, it actually gives us a better roadmap for conservation and management.
Okay, so what does that roadmap look like? What can we actually do?
First and foremost, we need to protect the forests we have. That means reducing deforestation, creating protected areas, and supporting sustainable forestry practices.
So really thinking about forests as more than just timber, recognizing all those other essential things they provide, like clean air, water, carbon storage.
Absolutely. We need to shift our whole perspective from seeing them as resources to be exploited to seeing them as essential life support systems that need our protection.
And what about restoration? Can we help repair the damage that's already been done?
Restoration is crucial, but it's not just about planting trees. It's about restoring those vital connections. Thinking about things like diversity, planting those mother trees, helping those mycorrhizal networks to regrow.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about those connections, those intricate relationships. It's not just about individual trees, it's about the whole web of life.
That's the heart of it. Forests aren't just resources. They're complex, resilient communities that deserve our respect and protection.
Well said.
All this talk about technology and innovation, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement.
Yeah, but I guess it's important to remember that technology is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Exactly. The real key is understanding that forest complexity and finding ways to work with it. Sustainable practices, that's what it's all about.
It's like you can have the fanciest tools, but if you don't know how to use them.
It's not going to get you very far. And that's where I think traditional ecological knowledge comes in.
Yeah. We've touched on that before. Those indigenous communities who've been managing forests for centuries.
They have so much wisdom to share, and often what they've been doing all along aligns perfectly with what science is now discovering.
So it's about recognizing that there are different ways of knowing.
Absolutely. And learning from those who have lived in harmony with forests for generations.
It's like instead of just extracting knowledge from forests, we should be thinking about building a more reciprocal relationship.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from nature, we're part of it.
It's like that saying, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children.
That's a good one. And I think it applies perfectly here because the health of the forest is ultimately tied to our own well-being.
I think that's a really powerful message for our listeners.
It is. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem.
Yeah, like what can one person do?
But even small actions can make a difference. Supporting sustainable practices, planting trees, getting involved in advocacy, all of that matters.
So we've talked about challenges, we've talked about solutions, but what about the future? What does the future hold for forests?
Well, it's hard to say for certain. The choices we make now will determine whether forests thrive or decline.
It sounds like we're at a crossroads.
We are, but there's reason for hope. We're seeing more and more awareness of the importance of forests, not just for their economic value, but for everything they do for the planet.
People are starting to get it.
They are. And that's leading to some exciting innovations in forestry, reforestation, and community-based conservation.
It sounds like there's a lot of positive energy out there.
There is. And if we can harness that energy and turn it into action, I think we can make a real difference.
So we need to shift our perspective from seeing forests as just a resource to be exploited.
To seeing them as these complex, interconnected systems that are vital for life on Earth.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected, from the tiniest microbe in the soil to those giant trees and to each other.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And by protecting forests, we're not just doing something good for nature, we're doing something essential for ourselves.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've covered so much ground, from those tiny mycorrhizal networks to the global challenges.
And yet it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn.
Always. And that's what makes it so fascinating. The natural world is full of wonder. And for our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, keep asking questions.
Because the future of forests depends on all of us. Wow, we've really gone deep into the forest, haven't we? I feel like we've journeyed from the microscopic world of those fungal networks all the way up to the global view of forests and climate change.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how much more complex and interconnected forests are than I ever imagined.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious, what would you say are the most essential things for people to understand about this complexity?
Well, I think the core idea is that a forest isn't just a bunch of trees, it's a whole community. Every organism, from the fungi to the insects, has a role to play. It's all connected.
It's like a giant web of life.
Exactly. And when you try to manage forests without understanding that, you're missing the whole picture. You can't just plant trees and call it a day.
It's about protecting those connections, those relationships that make forests so resilient.
Right, and that's where the idea of stewardship comes in. It's about recognizing the value of forests and taking responsibility for their well-being, not just for today, but for generations to come.
Stewardship. It's a powerful word. It implies a long-term commitment, a sense of care that goes beyond just using forests for our own needs.
Exactly, and that's the kind of shift in thinking that we need if we want to ensure a healthy future for forests.
So looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for forests and for those working to protect them?
Well, climate change is the elephant in the room. It's the biggest threat facing forests worldwide.
Yeah, with those rising temperatures, droughts, wildfires, It's a lot for forests to cope with.
It is, but forests are incredibly resilient. They've survived all sorts of challenges throughout history. The question is, can we help them adapt to these new pressures?
So that means reducing our emissions, protecting existing forests, restoring what's been lost.
Absolutely. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's also a lot of positive energy and innovation happening in the world of forest conservation.
What are some of the most exciting developments you're seeing?
Well, there's a growing awareness of the importance of forests, not just for timber, but for all the ecological services they provide. Clean air, water, carbon storage.
It's like people are finally starting to connect the dots.
They are. And that's leading to exciting new approaches in sustainable forestry, reforestation, community-based conservation. There's a lot to be hopeful about.
That's great to hear.
And I think we're at a turning point. We have the knowledge, we have the tools, and more importantly, we have the will to make a difference.
It's inspiring to see so many people working to protect these incredible ecosystems.
It is. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play. Whether it's supporting sustainable practices, advocating for forest conservation, or simply appreciating the beauty and wonder of forests, every action counts.
Well said. It's been an absolute pleasure exploring the world of forests with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those connections strong. Until next time, stay curious.